Yeah, good evening, my name is Jason City. I'm your co-host for this evening.
And I'm Shirley Yu, a high school student learning and living in West Vancouver. I'm extremely passionate about the environment and so grateful to be serving as your co-host tonight. So we will begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. We recognize and respect them as nations in this territory, as well as their historic connections to the lands and waters surrounding us since time immemorial.
So, welcome to all, and with our live and Zoom audience. Welcome to the West Vancouver All Candidates Forum on the Environment. This debate is organised by local residents and is the first ever West Vancouver municipal all candidate meeting that has been hosted with a focus exclusively on the environment. Let me emphasise that this meeting is not about positive voices. Some people have had questions about our group, and we have answered many of those on our website. I would ask candidates and audience members to stay on the subject. Comment or criticise policy for sure, but please keep your comments respectful. And we're not going to debate climate change, but instead discuss what we can do to address our changing climate and protect the incredible environment that we have the privilege to inhabit.
It is abundantly clear that Canadians of all ages and backgrounds care deeply about the environment. Human-caused climate change is now affecting every continent, region, ocean on Earth, including our weather. West Vancouver has experienced devastating floods, extreme shore damages, and overwhelmingly high temperatures impacting our vulnerable residents, as well as killing many foreshore species. These are only a few examples of the drastic consequences of climate change. The urgency for all of us to act is undeniable.
Thank you. So, thank you to all of the candidates who are able to attend today. Really appreciate you being here. We'll start, of course, with the council candidates, and at about 8 o'clock, we'll move on to the mayoral candidates. The questions we'll ask are from Positive Voices supporters and others, and reflect issues of concern to all of us. We will not be taking questions from the audience, but we do encourage everyone to follow up with the candidates afterwards. Most of them, if not all of them, have their contact information on their websites, or you could just collar them here, I guess. So, that also includes, do follow up with people who are not here tonight or declined to come along to this important discussion.
First, some housekeeping notes. Please turn off your mobile phones. Bathrooms are around in the back, and fire exits are clearly marked back there and back there. We are broadcasting this debate live through Zoom webinar. It is also being recorded and will be available on the Positive Voices website. Finally, we would greatly appreciate it if you can help us cover the cost of hosting this event by making a donation. We can take cash at the welcome table today, or you can donate at our website, positivevoiceswv.org.
Right, let's get going. So Keith and Mary are our timekeepers over there. We have a card and bell system. Do you want to ring the bell? Tinkle the bell? Okay. And that will indicate when to wind up and when to stop. We have to be strict so that we're fair to all of our candidates. We also ask our candidates to remain seated while answering.
So our first question tonight is for all candidates. You have 1 minute to answer the question going from left to right. What would be your #1 priority for the environment in West Vancouver?
Okay, the mic is off. Test one. Are you laughing?
name is Mayoral. I'm running for council. So to address your question, I believe if we take the issue in a data-driven approach, then we can actually find out where the actual target regarding environment we should have. For example, 6 ton per capita we're talking about in West Vancouver. In the region is 5 tons. Now, 40% of that goes to transportation, about 40%, 39 point something. If we have options about transportation, for example, bike lanes that, they're going around, that's one way. Another way, as you see in my signs, is the smart village thing that basically says everything within 15 minutes, your work, your grocery, your transportation access. That way we can actually address this issue in a much more concrete manner.
Thank you. John,
this is available in the LCNBC. This is the taxpayers who pay property tax can get $1,000 from the city of Nelson to Nelson Hydro, or 2 or 3. Loan protected taxes, and it's a great way to to school. Especially Cap College. If I had an e-bike when I was going to Cap College, hell yeah, I'd do it all day long. To another thing is, so a lot of time I spend traveling to and from West Vancouver. It's a large source of the carbon dioxide and iron workers bridge that can move traffic a lot quicker. So my is a lot, but bridge there definitely keep us moving. Make it a lot quicker for us to get to the places we want. So that I
Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming. I think the first thing I would like to do are small things that make big jumps. And the first thing would be to do with the roads and to do with traffic. And we can pull together a plan very quickly and run a trial over 6 months that provides data and allows us to negotiate with the provincial and federal governments. And in the process of doing that, we can decrease GHGs, get more people cycling, get kids out walking to school. We can get a bike trail going along to North Vancouver and more people on that. And we can also increase safety for children.
Thank you, Eileen. Christine Cassidy.
Christine Cassidy. Thank you very much for coming. So what I would do, is I could mention the 3 choices. How many do I have? 4 choices. Okay. My top choice, thank you, is to start with the obvious. Number 1, protect our foreshore. We already have an existing foreshore committee that has worked long and hard through the years. It is time to give them a stronger voice, and it is time to actually listen to what they have to say. They know their stuff, they have the experience, and they have the expertise. We need to protect our foreshore. Number 1. Number 2, we need to protect our upper lands. No building above the 1,200-foot mark. End of subject. Cast in stone, not happening. When I was on council, I advocated strongly for the tree bylaw to protect that natural habitat. That came into fruition also when Councillor Gambielli was on that same council. So that's number 2, the lands above. Number 3, bring in more shuttle buses to bring people more south. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Alexis Schickel.
Thank you. The exciting piece, Tyler, is that the e-bike incentive program has been approved just recently by council. So that is coming into fruition, which is exciting. Top for me is not a simple answer. Complete villages. which includes housing infrastructure, mixed use, small buildings, which themselves, when they're building smaller, it's actually the biggest effect for our local government to be able to decrease greenhouse gases. Land use is key. Those features also include transit. We build this mixed-use buildings and low-rise structures around transit and amenities to create walkability. That brings people to be able to get their groceries without needing to jump in their cars. They can get on their bikes. We build infrastructure that they can get out village to village, create complete villages, and keep on going. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis.
Well, it's hard to choose one, but I will try, and I will just start by saying that many of the ideas that have been presented and that will be presented, this is the good news, are already in progress with our staff. We have just approved a climate action strategy, which includes all types of issues like land use, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, adaptation to climate change, and protection of our natural assets. So that is the really good news. We're on track, but it has taken way too long. I've been an environmental advocate for 25 years, and the problem, the answer to your question is that my number one priority is having a majority on council who are elected to support environmental activity, climate action. I want to see a majority on this council who will vote for the right policies.
Thank you. Klaus Jensen.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Of course. What your number one priority be for the environment in West Vancouver?
Well, I'll answer the questions unlike everybody else. My number one, I believe that the number one issue is embodied carbon continued and needed during construction and development. If you do the analysis, huge amounts of carbon are emitted prior to the start of construction. Concrete, steel, glass, and asphalt are the ugliest environmental products in the world. And so the practical thing to do is to stop using those. If you're going to build, you should probably build with wood, which is a carbon sink. And I think that I'm going to go off topic now because everybody else did. I don't think you can talk about the environment without talking about traffic and without talking about development.
Thank you, Klaus. Rena Martinez.
Hi. What Klaus said is absolutely correct. So embodied carbon in their construction is a huge problem. But anyway, I'll try to make this as fast and quick. I think that we need to do a twofer. We need to create affordable housing for people who live and work here, because right now 75% of people who work in our city are traveling from outside of our city, often for an hour-ish in cars. So that's creating a huge amount of greenhouse gases. And the twofer on that is that we have to work with the provincial government to get funding to get reasonable transit here. I've talked to some of the developers. They're interested and open to the concept of increasing their affordable housing options if they get funding. So we'd have to lean on the provincial government and the federal government to get more funding, and maybe even private sources. So those would be my two big twofers, and I think the lowest hanging fruit is stopping plastic bags in West Van. That would be really low hanging fruit, and we could do that easily. That's it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm excited to talk about this. So my number one thing is governance. I think that there's a reason why ESG has environmental, social, and governance as core to it. And it is something that as a council, I think that we have to make a priority. There are lots of great plans being done. There are smart people working on them. There are great partnerships happening. They have to hit the ground, and we don't have a whole lot of time to make that happen. There are 2,644 days from today until January 1st, 2030. If you go backwards in time, my son turned 18 that same number of days ago. He's now 25 and he's in the audience. So I think that equates to about 160 council meetings, which means that climate and environmental issues need to be a priority in most of those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Schultz.
Hi, everyone. Also, thank you for coming out tonight. And top priority for me with the climate is completing the work that's already being done by current council. The climate action strategy plan is something that needs to be completed, so we have a framework for adaptation, mitigation, and protection of our natural spaces. So that's the first thing that needs to be done, because if we have a council that gets elected that does not prioritize the environment, it's going to be wasted taxpayer dollars, and it won't give us a framework to look to the future for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Bill Soprovich.
Well, one of my priorities is coming in retrofit and introducing a PACE program whereby we can get financial assistance from the provincial government and the local level to have 10,000 homes do the retrofit to heat exchangers. Secondly, we've done tremendous work over the foreshore, but we now need an action plan where we can formulate all our actions so the federal and provincial government start kicking in a lot of money, because it's going to cost a lot in the floodplain zones. Just to give you an example, I did a notice of motion on the Just Transition Act to the federal government. I introduced a notice of motion to the 2-stroke, 4-stroke engines to eliminate those. Dedicated the increase in the environmental levy to 1.5%. And if elected, folks, I'm going to put a notice of motion to have our 2,600 hectares designated as a park. Those are going to go a long way. And that's only barely my opening statement.
Thank you, Bill. Sharon Johnson.
Well, another one priority in West Vancouver environment would be the shoreline protection. Some of our most valuable assets, the beaches, the seawall, and then of course our personal homes. And there's a West Vancouver Shoreline Protection Society that historically has done this work, but it needs to be upgraded. They have a tremendous idea of building up the shoreline by dumping either a barge further out so the shoreline builds up and we don't have the waves crashing so close towards our land. And that's one of the simplest things we can do. It's got DFO approval, and we do have to partner with federal government and societies like this. And as well as the people with personal homes are willing to spend the time and money and invest in tombolas and things like that, can also build up a shoreline to protect the homes and just allow people to feel safe. Right now, I have so many people saying our docks, they're devastated that our docks are decrepit and they want them reinstalled. Oh, thanks.
The next questions will be given to each of 3 candidates, one at a time. Once they've answered, other candidates may choose to use their wild card by holding them up.
So each candidate has a wild card. They can use it once to respond or add a comment on something they feel strongly about. The wild card gives you 60 seconds of free airtime.
For Amir Levy, Tyler Blair, and Eileen Buchanan, you have 1 to respond to this question. Of the connection between housing, land planning, and climate change.
Did you have a question, please? Yeah.
Sure. So what is your understanding of the connection between housing, land use planning, and climate change?
That's great. So about the housing, my main primary goal in this campaign has been housing. And I believe we need to have the right mix of housing if we want to tackle pretty much any issue that we talk about. Environment, the crisis that we have with housing prices, and also the transportation, everything that you touch on, it goes back to housing. And regarding your question about how we can use the land in order to benefit the environment, right now, pretty much everywhere in West Vancouver, we can reuse our land for infills. Go on OCP and you will see that there's so much opportunity for subdivides, couch houses, laneway houses, and infills. And we have to utilize that. And when can we use the lot card? Can I use it like right now for the previous conversation?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Tyler Blair.
Well, this district has to make a lot of hard decisions on housing. I find it somewhat ironic that we're talking about embodied carbon, but we're planning on building all concrete, all steel, 3,700 units at Cypress Village, with all the infrastructure that goes along with that, all the curbs, all the sidewalks, all the storm drains. We didn't even consider, building with wood up there. I don't even know why. But infill housing is really delicate because it touches on neighborhoods and it touches on neighborhood character. And people are really concerned about spot zoning. And I don't even know if the district has a complete plan on this. It kind of sounds like the provincial government is going to take away zoning rights, especially around urban centers, because these things haven't been dealt with in years. Now, I have a tenuous housing situation. People might know that. I think we should build more housing in this community. It's very important to keep people who work here, especially I'm looking at some people in the back. We have ATU, Transit, Local 134 here. And, they're really concerned about livability in this community. And they're going through some negotiations for their contract. And I'd like to recognize them tonight. And they have that livability.
Thank you, Tyler. Eileen Buchanan.
Thank you. Everything is so connected. When you ask about priorities, it's hard. But housing, land use planning, and climate, obviously we need food, we need clean air, clean water, we need places for the fish, and we need safe bears. And we have to consider all those things and make sure there is land for all of those. So when we build, we need to consider, can we get gardens in, trees, just be careful where we put things, so we're leaving enough space for food crops and whatever else we need.
Thank you, Eileen. Oops. Right. Now, does anybody want to use their wild card to answer this question? No, you've already answered the question.
Oh, okay. I thought I could comment on that. Okay.
Okay, so we move on to the next question. Is it me? Yes, it is. David Eby, who is most likely to become the next premier of BC, says he wants to override single-family home zoning. This has for a while been looking at taking away local government powers to restrict building project approvals as a way to alleviate the chronic housing shortage. How would you respond to that? And Christine Cassidy, you're first.
May I ask who the other two are in the threesome? Oh, is it that you're going in that sequence? Sorry, thank you. How would I respond to that? I would say, no, thank you very much. We have an immigration policy right now, which is established by the federal government. I'm an immigrant, so I no one to complain about this subject of immigration. But when we're endeavoring to download all of your problems onto the local governments and not providing the financing to build the type of housing that we are required, the infrastructure that we are required to build to accommodate those newcomers to our community, then I say no, thank you. I do not believe in provincial government's business in local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Alexis Chicoine. Yes, of course. So it's really about the next premier, David Eby, likely, let's say. He wants to override single-family home zoning. This is something the province has talked about for some time because they are concerned about the housing crisis, the shortage of the number of council decisions where projects are not approved right across the Lower Mainland. So how would you respond to that if you were a councillor?
Well, I'm greatly concerned
We presently have a setup on council where many of our housing developments that are actually following the OCP have been turned down. And this is where we do need a new lineup of council people to allow for progress that is necessary. So the provincial and federal governments do not step into our housing crisis.
We need to allow for our mixed use around our transit, around our amenities. Allow for when owners and or developers are looking at land to put in a laneway house, into a couple of duplexes, into a larger property, or stratify their large house, we need to approve that. We've had these exact situations turned down by council, and the woman beside me who's looking for re-election does not do that. She does not turn them down, and neither does Marianne Booth, who I support. And we need these strong voices on council to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Nora Gambioli.
Well, I have to say that Alexis just stole a lot of my thunder. That's okay. The fact is that David Eby and the NDP government is looking to do this, and they're looking at our community. They are looking at West Vancouver, because we have not approved much housing in the last 4 years. So we are part of the canary in the coal mine, and they have been watching very carefully. And part of the reason why they're threatening to do this is because of people on council, some of whom are sitting up here today, who have not approved strata developments, who have not approved affordable housing. This is a big problem, a really big problem. So I wouldn't welcome it, but it may happen, and we may not have anything to say about it.
Thank you, Nora. Now, would anybody like to play their wild card? Rima Martinez.
Yeah, I think whoever you elect right now for mayor and for council is really, really important, because they will need to petition the government, like the provincial government, to control how this happens. And they also need to get ahead of it. I've spoken to hundreds of people right now within the community, and I have heard 0 people saying they don't support infill housing, low-rise housing, and housing options. So everybody that I've spoken to supports it. I'm sure that there's a minority out there someplace, but the thing is that we can't listen to the vocal minority, because we will literally be penned into a corner by David Eby and the rest of the province and forced to do things that we might potentially not want to see in our neighborhood. So it's really, really important that all of the neighborhoods get together and choose what they want to see their neighborhood look like. I think it's really, really, really important. And again, I think having affordable housing is extremely important as part of that equation.
Thank you. Christine Cassidy.
So you heard my first answer, and my first answer says it's exactly the same, which is no. The reason so many of the projects have been turned back is they haven't been appropriate for the character of this community, for the character of neighborhood. I've been on campaigning out there. I have heard no pushback on the idea of laneway housing, diversity in housing, duplexes, triplexes, and such the like. I am not hearing that pushback. I'm hearing acceptability that we need to densify over in due course, but we need to densify in accordance with the character of the neighborhoods, with the character of West Vancouver, the seaside funky little community that we are, and we need to respect that vibe.
Thank you.
2 seconds. Thus far, all the projects that have been approved, such as gateway housing, nobody has expressed the fact that we're about to have 7,000 new residents coming to Cypress Village. Look at the projects that have been approved. Thank you.
About to, but it will take 20 plus years. Sorry, I made a mistake, so I apologize. In terms of the rules of this, I allowed Christine to speak again on me. Amir Alavi, you played your wild card.
Yes, so let's talk about the character of the community. The character of the community cannot be sustained when we have less than 10% of our first responders in our community living in this community. Now imagine if something happens, a natural disaster happens, people that were supposed to be working here and be the first responders, they would be stuck. And the character of the community and the charm of the community that some of the candidates are talking about, and they just keep harping about this, will be destroyed, and we can't do anything about it because we didn't have the right people at the right time, because we didn't provide the workforce housing at the right time. And at the end of the day, if you care about this, you have to be for the right mix of housing and affordable housing. And that's it.
Thank you. Now on to our next question. Oh, a wild card. All right. Klaus Jensen.
Yeah,
you're allowed to. Yep.
Hi, I'm really challenged by this discussion. I was led to believe it was an environmental discussion, not a housing discussion. I ran a business for 30 years. We had 400 employees. I had 15 direct reports. We would have annual meetings. And if my managers answered the questions the way these people have been answering, I would be having them outside, having a chat with them. You have to focus, and the focus supposedly was on the environment, not on affordable housing or this housing or pretty housing, or we have to do this, we have to do that. And so I would urge that we answer the questions and not go off into la la land about other items.
Thank you, Klaus. Klaus. All right. Oh, another wild card. All right. Bill Soprovich.
Thank you so much. It came out in the North Shore News today that West Vancouver continues to see the country's highest average rental price for a one bedroom of $2,828. When we devise housing for the future, who is it for? Is it for the elderly sitting in this audience, I am one of them, who finds that over 30% of my income is going to rent? That is horrendous. And the young family, like this young fellow, how is he going to afford when the average of a 3-bedroom is $6,800 rent today? So when we create this housing, and I've been called Mr. NIMBY, King of NIMBY. Well, give me a break. I saw a lot of spot zoning. I will want to see some planning, proper planning in this community of the right type of housing, and asking developers to say, hey, look, for the future now, you're going to have to create affordability, and you're not through the CACs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Our next question is, how do we preserve our natural assets, foreshore, forests, and streams, and extend our urban tree canopy? Can we have Klaus Jensen answer first, please?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. How do we preserve our natural assets, foreshore, forests, and streams, as well as extend our urban tree canopy?
You know, I'm sorry, I don't understand and I can't answer it, so I'll pass it on.
Okay, that's up to you.
You can have my time.
I actually don't know.
Rima Martinez.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
For sure. So how do we preserve our natural assets, foreshore, forests, and streams, as well as extend our urban tree canopy?
That's an immensely large question. So I'm just going to focus on the urban tree canopy because it's something that I can speak to. With the urban tree canopy, I think we had at some point, there was a working group that wanted to have a specific number of trees per, I believe, square footage per property. And I actually think that that's probably a really good way to look at it, because a lot of developers, like single family homes especially, they often clear properties completely. I work on them. So, and then they will plant like, maybe 2 or 3 little trees. I think if we have a specific number that they need to hit, and potentially even an age of tree, because you can buy tiny little saplings, or you can buy a tree that's 10 or 15 years old, which has a much larger chance of surviving. There's a lot of profit in the single family home realm, so they can afford it. And I think it'll also give people who have existing properties opportunities to re-landscape if they wanted to, as long as they retain the tree numbers that they have, and potentially even put in gardens for like food and things like that. Okay.
Thank you, Rima. Elaine McHarg.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to say something that actually relates back to housing, but I'm taking it from a different angle. So one of the ways that we can preserve our natural space is by moving forward with Cypress Village. If Cypress Village is not built, it will, the development that is already approved for British Pacific Properties that goes with the land that they purchased over 90 years ago will affect 85% of the upper lands. That's what it'll affect. So going with Cypress Village will only impact 25%. So there's the preservation of a beautiful park land for the community, but it also is the preservation of all the natural assets that are in that park. The other thing I would say is the fact that we now have a natural asset inventory, which we need to manage carefully. And back to the area of governance, we need to make sure that the plans that we put in place are resourced appropriately, both from a staffing point of view, an expertise point of view, and a funding point of view.
Thank you, Elaine. Any wild cards? Okay.
No, okay, moving on. You've used your wild card, I believe. You get it once. Yes. Right. The next question is for Ken Schultz, Bill Soprovich, and Sharon Thompson. So, should we be setting aside more money through the environmental levy, for instance, and even insurance to protect our community from increasingly extreme weather events, what's often referred to as climate adaptation? Ken, first.
So I know the last thing people like to hear is let's pay more taxes. So I do believe we need to be allocating more money to adaptation because a long-term cost is going to cost taxpayers more. Looking back to last year when our whole lower mainland was disconnected from the rest of the province, it's really important to keep in mind that those are the kinds of risks that we face if we don't start planning now and investing in good infrastructure now. So I am open and do think we should be allocating more money and increasing the environmental levy, but also looking at other ways to generate funds as well, because it is a time of high inflation and many households are facing financial struggles right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I think on council, I put a motion to amend the 1% to 1.5% on the environmental levy, and I think that should be seriously looked at every year to increase it. If we don't get a plan together to build a pod to fight even king tide and downwater problems, we're going to be in the soup. I spent 2 years as a liaison with Ms. Thompson here on the sea level rise group. We came up with a tremendous policy to advise council. Now we allotted some money just the other day, Madam Mayor, I think, to go ahead and have that committee find an action plan to present to the provincial and federal government of monies needed to go ahead and rectify the subtidal foreshores for our low floodplain zones in West Vancouver. We have done the DPA of 800 homes along the water. They know that they're going to have a geodetic rise. Look at the ferry building that we did. That's the level of future homes in floodplains in West Vancouver. We have been on it and we have worked through it.
Thank you, Bill.
Is that over? That's hardly my opening statement.
All right, Shannon Thompson.
So as I'm sure you all know, we've just approved our first environmental levy to the tune of 1.2 million this year. And you know what I'm looking for is to see how we spend that, because my number one foundational approach to my decision making is how do we not waste your money, the taxpayers' money. So with this 1.2, what I'm looking to see is we spend it on things that actually make a difference in our community, and then devise a percentage of that we hold and build for future asset levies and create some sort of plan like that, Right now, there's a lot we can do. We're going to need senior government funding. We can't do it right off the bat by ourselves, but there are things, especially protecting our foreshore, that we have to get on before our next storm season. So we need to build it. We need to build it responsibly. We've got a big increase in inflation and utility taxes. We've got a lot of expenses coming down on each individual household. So we have to come up with a plan to, we've established it and we will grow it.
Thank you, Sharon. Right, the next question. Oh, go ahead, Nora Gambioli. We have somebody tracking the wildcard use. So has anybody not used their wildcard? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so your question was related to the 1.5% climate levy. So I'm sorry, but I just have to speak out because the majority of council supported a 1.5% climate levy in March. But I have to tell you that Councillor Sharon Thompson and Councillor Peter Lambert voted against the climate levy. So I think it's really ironic that now we have Sharon Thompson speaking about how to spend that money when she didn't want us to even have the levy. Councillor Thompson also voted against the e-bike incentive program on the 26th of September. So I think, again, it's very important to know how the votes shake down. And I would also like to increase the climate levy if possible in the future. However, it is stuck at 1.5% going forward, which gives us $1.2 million a year to work with.
Thank you. All right, so, oh, yeah. Sharon, go ahead.
Okay, hold your fire. You'll have a chance, honestly. Tyler Blair.
I'd just like to thank Sharon Thompson for being a fiduciary for this community and actually, taking in consideration taxation. As a young person, taxation is an issue. Adding taxes all the time, adding step code 5, being the first in Canada to do this has added a problem to affordability in this community. Now, as far as the e-bike program, I kind of caught wind of this because there was actually a typo of 500 instead of 50, and people were concerned there was a $225,000 mistake. There was not. But when I looked at it, it was to help 100 people, $136,000 of taxpayer money to help 100 people get on average a $1,000 payment cash for an e-bike. Now, my program is a loan collateralized against the ratepayers. So your money you'd be getting it back. And the community already earns interest on money they hold aside. So this would just be a rate transfer. It wouldn't cost the community anything. That's a great program. We can't just keep throwing cash at small issues. You have to tackle the issues at a larger scale. And that's why my program is a lot better than the program at hand.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the last question for anyone who hasn't used their Y card yet. So the province has set a target for greenhouse gas emissions from buildings to be reduced by 50% by 2030. How do we accomplish this goal given that 55% of our emissions come from homes?
Alexis Chacoin.
Thank you. So I kind of gave this answer away at the beginning. It is well documented by research that by containing housing in complete villages with mixed use, smaller square footage, when we have row houses, duplexes, this is the biggest power that a municipality has and the biggest reduction in greenhouse gases. This is research based. At the same time, we also have a number of features we can do to eliminate for climate change, and that's to limit development in hazard-prone areas. We ensure that the built environment can withstand a range of environmental stress. We build with the right materials, with our homes, with our other developments. Local area plans will control this. We move forward with Ambleside and Dunderave. Our developers, our homeowners will be able to know what to plan for, what to build and where, and that will help greenhouse gases to eliminate or diminish.
Thank you, Alexis. Who else would like to speak to this? Sharon Thompson, you haven't used your wildcard?
Who has not used it? Oh, sorry. Would you like to speak? I guess you have to speak, right? Anybody?
No, you don't have to speak on it.
You know, I spent my ticket early and yet there's important issues.
You know what? Buyer's remorse.
Sorry?
Does anybody else want to speak now?
Okay.
No.
You'll have a chance, Sharon, just a moment. Okay, so who wants to speak? I'll open it up. Not right now. We'll finish this one, then move on. Don't worry about the wild card. I'm changing the rules. So who wants to speak to this question right now? So Bill. The question. So the province has set a target for greenhouse gas emissions from buildings to be reduced by about 50% from current levels by 2030. So how do we accomplish this goal, given that 55% of our emissions come from homes?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. As of right now, all new development through zoning has to include low energy facility. In our 10,000 homes, which where most of the emissions come from, we are going to have to look at a way to pay for it. We can't do it on the backs of taxpayers' money. It's got to be a provincial program enabling the local government to set up a financial plan to aid all people who want to get involved in the heat exchange business. And that's really important. That's where most of the energy, we're going to save a lot of carbon emissions from that alone. And yet it's a program that has not been enacted. It's called the PACE program. It's big in the States. Canada is not there yet. And we have to say to the provincial government now, let's get involved in that program. We entered, I think, if I'm correct, we put up $30,000 and it was used that quickly. Why should the taxpayers of West Vancouver in a retrofit of their home be asked to pay for it all when the provincial government is claiming $8,000 a year from you for school taxes that goes into general revenue?
Thank you, Bill. Who else would like to speak to this? Elaine McHarg.
Hello, everyone. So earlier, Klaus mentioned embodied carbon development and how problematic that is. I think that a lot of these solutions take a long line of sight. And so staff and the team have done a really good job working on the operational side of carbon reduction and how we manage that. It's time to start turning our attention to these longer term solutions that are about embodied carbon development in a positive way. There are leaders across North America that are doing this, and we have room to be able to, kind of look at that, especially given the fact that we have the opportunity to build close to the mountain and use some of the resources that are there without having to import them, without having to pay for transportation and all of that, and do milling right on site. So that's one of my suggestions.
Thank you, Elaine McHarg. Anybody else for this question, or we'll move on? Right, transport. A question that'll appeal to our friends at the back. Given that 40% of West Van residents' greenhouse gas emissions come from vehicles, and even electric cars add to traffic congestion, what would you do to reduce our dependency on cars? And this is for everybody, and we're going to start with
Sharon Thompson and go that way.
Sorry.
Well, for me, I actually feel quite impassioned about this. To get people out of cars, you need an inspired transportation system, and you need a regional transportation system, and you need a transportation system that will get people out of their cars. I've talked a number of times and written a few articles on how there is a proposal to bring light rail, not rapid buses, from Metrotown into West Vancouver. There's also been some investigation of creating a hydrogen train up the Sea to Sky corridor. And, you know, here we are in Cypress Village, building a village for the future, 20 to 50 years. We've got to look at our transportation system the same way. Bringing the B line was a diesel bus, old Vancouver diesel bus. And now we're getting another rapid bus. We have buses and in a corridor that has a lot of bus systems where we're not getting people out of their car.
Thank you, Sharon.
Find out.
Okay, Bill Sopovich.
Could you repeat the question, please?
For sure. So given that 40% of West Vancouver residents' greenhouse gas emissions come from vehicles, and even electric cars add to traffic congestion, what would you do to reduce our dependency on cars?
Well, first off, the traffic problem is not caused by West Vancouver alone. We are a flow-through community going to Sea to Sky and to the ferries. One of the big things that TransLink can do is create a bus system from Whistler and Squamish down, eliminate a lot of that traffic. The Department of Highways is looking at a redo of the on-off ramps in West Vancouver coming up. I don't know, Madam Mayor, when that was going to come. There has been a North Shore Connect doing a lot of work about looking at a future transition to from Park Royal out to Metrotown, a bus system. Our blue bus system is one of the finest in the world. It was the oldest in the world, and we can improve going to Vancouver and to UBC. I don't want to be the first person to tell a West Vancouverite whether they can get out of their car or not. That's their business. So we got areas of looking at young people may not have a car in the future. We may look at cycling. Our system for safety of bicycles is not there yet. And am I over? My goodness.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Ken Schultz.
So I'm going to actually expand on what Bill just said there, because as a young person myself who doesn't actually want to buy a car, it's nice to have more safe choices. And that's one of the things that we don't have in our community, are choices to get around. So the way I look at transportation is there's moving in West Van and then moving out of West Van. Moving out of West Van, we need to be at the table with the province and other municipalities to deliver a solution that works. Sharon said we need to be looking for light rail because Cypress Village is a project, that's going to be built out for the future. However, it's been in the works for over 20 years with the first report dating back to 2003. So this is a project that's taking over 50 years to fully complete. Do we need to wait 50 years before we actually see light rail and rapid transit in our community? The bus rapid transit provides it in a shorter time frame. Now, looking into West Vancouver, more bus access to connecting residents to their main commercial areas. As someone that lives in Eagle Harbor out west, there's no way to go from Eagle Harbor up Westport Road to Caulfield Village, where I work and shop. If I did, I have to take 2 buses.
Thank you, Ken. Elaine McCarr.
I'll just continue on from Ken's points. and so I agree with everything that Ken has just said. We need a much better integrated planning process around transportation, around mobility, period. The other thing we need to do is the fact that we need to restore some of the areas that we've lost. We lost the UBC bus. Both of my kids traveled to UBC. It does a couple of things. One is the fact that it imprints people with the fact that they can stay at home and they can still go to a great university. And the other side that I would say around imprinting is we need to make sure that our young people understand how to take transportation, how to walk to school, all of those types of things. We have a mentality around car use here because we're imprinting our children on the fact that the only way that you get to school is by mom or dad driving you, and that needs to change. So safe streets to walk on, more mobility solutions, and integrated planning.
Thank you, Elaine. Rima Martinez.
So absolutely what Bill and Ken and Elaine said is correct. I do think that the reality though is that TransLink doesn't give us a lot of options because we are a very low density neighborhood. So from what I've heard is that they basically dictate the options to us. They're limited, and if our community turns them down, we often don't get a second choice. So that's something that we need to look at as a community. So that notwithstanding, I think other things that we can do locally is things where you can actually walk from your home to go and get groceries. So like the Cypress Village is excellent. I think it's wonderful because it will help all those people above the highway to stop driving all the way down to Park Royal. So, you know, you'd be able to actually like ride an e-bike over there quite easily. Again, spot rezoning in most neighborhoods would be fantastic to have some small retail and small commercial spaces so we can work and live in the same neighborhoods. And so it will limit our needs to go and drive elsewhere. Plus it'll make living a lot nicer. I would love it personally.
Thank you, Rima. Klaus Jensen.
I thought the question was, how do we get people out of cars? Is that the right question?
You could interpret it that way, for sure.
All right, well, that's the way I interpret it then. So really, there's bikes, ferries, buses, and how do we motivate people to get into that, one or the other? And of course, the other option is, as you were saying, build small little communities. You know, take whatever it is, a couple of square miles, and you change the community, so you have a local store, and you can walk down, and kids can have candy. So that's a cool thing. In terms of practical, and I talk about things that's in control of West Vancouver, these grand plans about getting the provincial government and Canada government, that's a 30-year plan. I would say that what I would propose is to give free bus passes to all workers that work physically in West Vancouver.
Thank you, Klaus. Nora Gambioli.
Well, I'll say I agree with everything that Ken and Elaine had said earlier, but the good news is that we have a strategic plan. And it was created a year and a half ago, and it has a whole section on mobility to improve mobility and reduce congestion for people and goods. We have a bus rapid transit system thanks to our great relationship with TransLink that is under advisement, if you will, right now. It will take 50,000 cars off the road between Park Royal and Metrotown when it's built. So that's on the way. We have a strategic plan being rewritten and updated, and we have a goal to expand, diversify, and improve the safety and appeal of active transportation, cycling, and pedestrians. We're also trying to build near transit, but I will tell you that Councillor Wong and Councillor Thompson voted against this strategic plan.
Thank you, Nora. Alexis Chicoine.
Much has been said already, but that 75% of our workforce is actually driving in here from elsewhere. So we need to get people out of their cars. We need to get them living here. We have talked to death about creating complete villages so we can have some of the more affordable housing, even low market housing for our workforce to live here, to get that 75% living here. We complete our pedestrian and cycling network to integrate with our transit, our villages, our facilities. We provide alternatives for driving as wider weather protected sidewalks, protected bike lanes, integrated, comfortable bus stops, and we strengthen our connections between our housing, our employment, and our frequent transit networks. These are some of the key issues I've pulled out actually of the OCP. This is not new ideas. This is what is happening today. This is on the forefront of council, and we need a council that will move forward with these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Christine Cassidy.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to take this as a bit of a segue to what I'm going to say. So please do not count this as my time. Personally, no, please don't, because I speak on behalf of everyone who's sitting at this in these chairs here today, and all those who will be sitting in chairs for other meetings and for all the future meetings to come, for whatever the council is. I personally find it exceedingly offensive when individuals who have been seated on the current council are criticized for their votes. I could sit here and do similar to Councillor Gambioli. However, that is not how one works in a diplomatic, democratic society. I find it offensive. Thank you. So now I will answer your question. So, and by the way, I am not particularly partial one way or another to Sharon Thompson, diplomatically or democratically speaking. Whether I vote for her, whether I don't know. But I will tell you, I support her right and the rights of everyone on the council to vote as they see conscionable and in the best interests of West Vancouver. So thank you. So when we talk about biking, that is delightful. But the fact of the matter is we're a north-south community as much as we are an east-west community. So what I think we need to do to get people out of their cars is provide
Keith,
not.
sorry, I believe time is up. Is that right?
No, actually, sorry. I asked segue.
Okay,
not
so
fair.
You had a minute to answer a question which was reasonably clear.
Well,
and
I actually find that offensible.
no, I think, if we're going to allow anybody to speak on anything that they feel
I think you put that question out to the audience as to whether or not I should be given the time to answer the question.
No, please move along. You'll have more opportunities to speak.
All right, I accept the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Eileen Buchanan.
Okay, I have nothing against buses, but when the little girl was almost killed at the base of my driveway, I have figured out why. And we have empty buses lined up around Irwin Park School, 3 or 4 of them, and they speed. So when the children are trying to get out of cars, which they shouldn't be in, to cross the road to the school, they're ducking in between buses and cut through drivers in order to get into the school. We also have empty buses driving along Mathers Avenue in West Vancouver, which ends at a creek. And the reason this is, we also have no speed bumps, no sidewalks, nothing. And the reason why we're getting so much cut through is because the last council put speed bumps. Am I finished or I get a bit more? There's speed bumps in certain areas that
Thank you, Eileen.
I finished? Okay.
Tyler Blair.
Well, I'm Tyler Blair and I'm endorsed by your blue bus, ATU Local 134. Why? Because I'm a compassionate voice for some of the issues in West Van. One of them is the Blue Bus Union was trying to get a deal done. And if you've noticed your service in West Van has been lacking a little bit lately, it's because the mechanics can't keep up. They're underpaid, they're all jumping ship, and they can't keep up. They were in the back here earlier. I don't know if you guys noticed them, but they were. So the deal is the district, in their wisdom, thought it'd be good to negotiate this way. They said no to binding arbitration and let the action happen through the summer. No overtime and a uniform ban. Only to go into binding arbitration when the school year started. Now, to me, that's a really odd way of negotiating. It's also a really odd way of supporting workers. It's a really odd way of encouraging affordability. And it's a really odd way of encouraging the blue bus transit system, which is controlled by TransLink, but the money is controlled by the district. And that's the dirty little secret.
Thank you, Tyler. Amir Lavi.
Thank you so much. So I agree with Ken, Lane, Nora, and also Alexis, but talking about the voting record, when we have a way that can actually measure someone's consistency on an issue, and especially for an incumbent, we have to use it. Now, it doesn't mean that they cannot vote as they wish. It means that if they say that they are in support of, for example, foreshore development permit area, and they want to see it going, they actually had an opportunity to vote for it, but they didn't. So these are the points that the only way that we can see whether the incumbents are consistent is to see their voting records. So that's number one. 10 seconds. I said I agree with Ken, Elaine, Nora, and Alexis. The last point is every single point that we just talked, if you just trace it back to the major issue. That major issue is housing.
Thank you, Amir. Okay, so we're just going to test a little. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sharon Thompson.
Thank you. Since we're talking about voting records, I think it's really important to consider that the vote itself isn't the whole story. And in fact, when the environmental levy came to the floor, it was supposed to be 1%, which I did support. I care about the environment as much as anyone else in this room. But as I said earlier, we're in a time facing cost of living increases and a bunch of other pressures on our coming to us. And so as a decision maker, I just wanted to act cautiously. Let's start with 1%, see how we spend it, which takes me to the e-bike initiative. My bottom line is let's not waste your money. We're not sure how impactful this program is going to be for reducing GHG emissions. You're using our very small environmental levy on a program, $135,000, that could be put towards stewardship groups like stream keepers and other things that actually make a difference, or food security that make significant difference in our community.
What am
Go
I
ahead, Bill.
referring to now?
Right. Well, I'm
free, open
primed
mic?
to ask the next
Yeah.
question, but
Well, okay.
Sharon wanted an opportunity to respond for
So
some time.
a voting record, look, I've been before you for 26 years as a councillor. And what's wrong with my?
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question.
It's open mic time, folks.
You know, all of us remember stuff later that we wanted to get off our chest. You don't always get that chance. The next question is about transit. A lot of warm words have been spoken about how much people love transit, love their bus union, are endorsed by the bus union. I would like to ask you, each of you, and we'll start with Amir, and this is a quicker round, 30 seconds. When was the last time you used the bus? And do you have a compass card?
I can happily answer that. I'm a UBC student right now. I'm studying my master's in public policy, and I use bus pretty much every day. If I'm going to school, I'm using it.
Thank you, Amir. Tyler Blair.
I use the bus all the time. Use the bus in Las Vegas when I travel. I use the bus in West Van when I go downtown. And I think this is a setup for me, but obviously I don't really know what that means. But yeah, I think we all use the bus as an example. The question is, do you support Blue Bus Transit? That's the question for this room.
Do you have a compass card, both of you?
No. You can pay by tap on the card.
Okay, interesting. Eileen Buchanan.
Do I use the bus? I use it when it's convenient, and it's not in many areas of West Vancouver. I did talk at Transit the other day, and I asked them to move the bus routes up and down the hill so that people weren't getting off the bus and carrying bags of groceries up basically a cliff. It's too hard. Is that my 30 seconds?
Thank you, Eileen. Christine Cassidy.
I use the bus when I need to use the bus. I have the great good fortune of living in an area where I can walk to most of the services that I need, and I know I'm fortunate. I tend to be a multi-purpose driver, go to the gym, go shopping, visit my grandchildren. It's many uses for the one trip, but when I'm a singular user, I use the bus. And no, I do not have a compass card because it's one less thing for me to misplace. I tap with my credit card when I get on the bus, and I'm very impressed with the individuals on our bus and our drivers.
And when did you last use the bus? Out of interest.
When did I last use the bus? I probably last used the bus, going back in recollection, probably about a week to 10 days ago.
Alexis Chicoine.
With my disability, it does make it a little more difficult. I actually don't live near a bus stop, but I luckily live right beside Park Royal. I'm in the Capilano Mobile Home Park over a little bridge, very walkable community, like Christina's saying, and it's awesome that I can get around. What I do use is actually the bike lanes. I have an e-system that attaches to my wheelchair. And I hope that I learn that the system that is coming up is also open to people with disabilities, because the e-systems are amazing. And I love the Spirit Trail and the bike trail. That's how I get around.
Thank you, Alexis. Nora Gambioli.
So to answer your question, last time I took the bus was last month. I can't tell you what day, sometime in September. I have a Compass card. I took the bus because I'm training the younger generation, my kids, to take the bus. So I took the bus with my daughter to Park Royal. And again, I'm also fortunate because I live nearby. I walked tonight. It's it's Go by Bike Week this week. So I've been riding my bike with Peter Schofield. I see you at the back as much as I can too. Thanks.
Thank you, Nora. Klaus Jensen.
Very, very fast. Probably 10 years ago or longer. I live in an area where the buses come by, I don't know, every hour and a half or something like that. And I drive an EV. And from what I can tell, our buses actually pollute more because they're driving very frequently with less than 10 passengers. And for the big buses, 10 passengers or less, they actually emitting more carbon per unit, per person, sorry, than if you drive a car.
Thank you, Klaus. Rima Martinez.
I don't take the bus. The area that I live, we get wet bus once an hour, and sometimes it doesn't show up, so there's no point in me taking it. That doesn't mean that I don't think that buses are important and that I don't think that public transit is important. Even if I continue to drive my car everywhere, I still think we need public transit. I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. So yeah, and when I was younger, I took the bus everywhere because I couldn't afford to have a car.
Thank you, Rima. Elaine McCart.
So I take the bus when I go downtown as often as I can, and not that I go downtown as often as I can, and I proudly live in a 4-person, 4 Compass card household, and the last time I took the bus was actually in August before I went on vacation to go downtown for the Pride Parade with my family.
Thank you, Elaine. Ken Schultz.
Given we're in the middle of a campaign and it's very challenging to zoom around the community on a bus. So last time my bus was in the last couple of weeks. I've owned a Compass card since day one, since they first implemented them when I was a student at UBC. And it's something I think other candidates here have highlighted that we need to improve service so that it is more convenient and more accessible for everyday use. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Bill Sopovich.
Thank you. Well, I took the ferry over and did a bus not recently, but here's the point. I drove in my car down to a destination downtown. I saw a couple get on the bus that I knew. When we arrived at the other end, they were walking at the same time as I arrived in the car. That's got to tell you, I need a good kick in the butt to start taking the bus more. That's all. And I think I encourage everybody. Wonderful system, you know.
Thank you, Bill. Sharon Thompson.
About 5 years ago, I decided to study downtown Vancouver, and I lived 5 minutes from a bus stop. And I was actually quite excited. I got my Compass card and went back and forth. But what I found quite quickly is while I could get downtown easily, it was a lovely ride. I'd often meet friends along the way. I always got a seat because I got on in Caulfield. I just couldn't get home in a timely way. And, you know, we're in a busy time of our lives, or when we are, you can't always afford those waits at the bus stop. So downtown at the Bay, you'd wait for 2 or 3 buses to come by. And I ended up doing park and ride from Park Royal.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, we're going to wrap up very soon, but we have the mayoral debate next. So I would like to ask you, we're going to ask the mayors about being leaders, leaders on the environment, leaders on climate change. What would you want from the mayor as leader on these issues on climate and environment? And we'll start with Sharon and go up.
Wow, that's a great question. I wish I had more time to think about it.
Sorry, 30 seconds each.
Oh
so
my
quick.
God, okay. You know, leadership is about setting a pace, setting a tone. And there's something I learned this year. I learned about climate anxiety. And it's this new phenomena around psychology, and they're finding a lot of people are suffering from it. And I think when you're setting policy and implementing things in your community, you have to do it in a responsible way that says, we're working on this, we're in this together, not shaming people and penalizing them for, trying to get them out of their habits. We are doing a lot of good work. And I'd like to see a leader who can elevate us all and say, we are in this together.
Thank you, Sharon. Bill Sopovich.
What's the question again? I didn't quite catch it.
So given that we've got the mayoral candidates discussing these issues next, what do you think makes a good leader on climate? Sometimes some organizations do have an official badge when they endorse candidates. They call them a climate leader. So what would make a climate leader?
I would make a great leader. If you're asking me to get in between mayors tonight on any issue, I'm not going to do that. I really don't. But if you look at the record for the last 4 years in this council, there's 3 incumbents here. We were forceful in going in the direction of climate change. And I mentioned some of the things tonight. So there you have it.
Thank you, Bill. Ken Schultz.
So for me, a leader is someone that really takes charge, respects and listens, and has climate at the forefront of policy decision-making. It's intertwined with every decision that local government makes, as it's a land use policy. Land use policy is the most important part. And so having a leader that really understands that and wants to carry that forward is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Elaine McHarg.
So mine is quite similar to that. For me, a climate leader has a climate lens, and they're willing to use that on a regular basis. And as I said at the very beginning, we have a very few number of meetings as council in the window of time where we can actually make some changes and make some impact. And so I think that I would want a leader that puts climate on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Rima Martinez.
I think a good climate leader, mayor, I honestly think in a community our size is just a good leader. I think it's somebody who works collaboratively with everyone and is able to convince the people on council to come to conclusions together that benefit not only our environment, but our community together. And personally, this is one of the primary reasons that I ran, because the current council has been quite dysfunctional in my mind. Again, that's my personal opinion. So I would really like to see more unity on council.
Thank you, Rima. Klaus Jensen.
I believe that a good leader listens loudly, asks lots of questions, and then is able to formulate. And to lead, you have to have an objective. You have to have a goal. So you ask the questions: where am I now? Where do I want to go? By when? And how am I going to get there? And it doesn't really matter whether it's for a budget. The environment is really no different. Set the goals, figure out how you're going to do it, and put some hard-ass time dates and when you're going to accomplish them.
Thank you, Klaus. Nora Gambioli.
Well, some of those were great ideas, and I won't repeat them, but I would say in addition that we need a leader who supports staff to do the actions that are in our strategic plan. So we need a mayor who will support the strategic plan and who has integrity in terms of past decisions and actions. And finally, who can make the tough choices and who has a track record of making those tough choices.
Thank you, Nora. Alexis Chicoine.
Stole my answer. I believe in integrity. Integrity that behind the doors when there's committee work, that when you actually make those decisions to move forward, that when you bring it to council, you follow through. You don't change the vote and then confuse the issue. We need to work together. We need to be collaborative. West Vancouver is amazing, but we're also the North Shore. So we have our North Shore Connects committee. Our present mayor happens to be the chair of that committee, and other metro departments as a group. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Christine Cassidy.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Because I think we've gone off track a wee bit.
Yeah, so it's really about who would make, or what are the qualities that would make a good climate or environmental leader?
All right. So I think a good leader is somebody on this subject matter, on all subject matters, but specific to this subject matter, because that's the question, who is informed and engaged and ensures that the council that they are working with is equally as informed and engaged, if not by them, then by others. And as they are the captain of the ship steering this community, that message goes into our school system, and the youth of today and the youth of tomorrow are also equally engaged and informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Eileen Buchanan.
Hi, I would like to see consistency, I guess it is, like seeing buses run empty, displacing bicycles and pedestrians so children can't walk to school, and then having nothing done about it. And using, I think we could get away with sidewalks and a lot of other things if we got rid of cut through driving in certain areas. So what we're, if the consistency between finished or thumbs up.
Thank you, Eileen. Tyler Blair.
Well, I'd like to thank West Vancouver for actually being climate leaders. They've already done a lot of work for this community. First, the Step Code 5. You passed an e-bike program. I happen to think it's the wrong program for the money that you're spending, but that's okay. But at the end of the day, I think a climate leader has to have some balance, because if you drive too far in one direction, you might have unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences of that are affordability. So if this community pushes too hard on environment and Step Code, like, I don't even know where you go beyond this. Petitioning the senior government for money, I get it. But you guys have to have some balance, and a leader has to listen to all aspects, not just environment.
Thank you, Tyler. Emil Lavi.
It's kind of hard to be the last person on this issue. So pretty much I agree with Alexis and Nora. I think integrity and caring is actually the most important factors. But just to address something, we can't have everything all together without some level of compromisation. We can't have our taxes reduced. We can't have then the best environmental policy and then affordability and everything all together. So that's the work of the mayor to get us to the right place.
Thank you, Amir. All right, so thank you to all the candidates for council this evening. A round of applause. We're now going to do a quick translation to our mayoral candidates. Please come forward and take your seats.
accepting our invitation. Mark Sager was not able to attend, and unusually for someone who's running for mayor, Teresa Dakotas appears to have disappeared. Has anyone seen her? Has someone filed a missing persons report?
Our questions to you may be different from those we ask council candidates. Again, these are sourced from positive voices, supporters, and subscribers. For our opening questions, you have 2 minutes each. What does it mean to be a climate or environmental leader, and how would your style be different from that of your opponents?
Okay, we're taking a name out of a bag to see who goes first.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I got 2.
No, 1.
Wow, okay, there. Is that 1? Wait,
Yes.
wait.
Marcus, 1.
Yeah.
Question.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's truly a pleasure to spend the evening with you. So in terms of climate change and environmental policy, I think it's really important to bring the entire community into this. The climate change emergency has been sort of described as a house that's on fire, and it's our house. And so I don't want to just use a water pistol to put it out. I want to use the water cannon, because if it's really an emergency, which it is, then we need to do everything that we can. We need to have the best minds, the most engaged and passionate people in this community working on solutions. I've often said that if 2 heads are better than 1, then certainly 44,000 heads are way better than 1. And this is our community. We have an opportunity to really make it better, to improve it, to fight climate change, to preserve our forests, our shorelines, and everything in between. And it behooves us. It's our responsibility to do that. One of my ideas is to have an environment committee made up of experts in the community, both retired folks as well as people working in the field, to come up with actual, really tangible solutions. You know, we talk about, transit, EVs, and the like. Those are great. But over the next 30 years, each of those, if they were adopted by the entire world, would actually only reduce about 9 gigatons for each. But there's some really big solutions out there. For example, if we moved to a plant-based diet, that would actually reduce, do you want to know how many? About 80 gigatons around the world. That's a big number, right? So that's the sort of thing we need to be doing. We need to take the biggest bite out of climate change, because if we're going to really make an impact on this, we can't do the small stuff. Yeah, we have to do the small stuff, but we need to do the big stuff, because that's what's really going to move the needle. So I know there will be further questions tonight, and so I don't want to go in too much into depth right now. But as we talk about those, I'd love to share some more, but we'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Marcus. Miriam Booth.
Thanks so much. All right. So to be a climate leader, well, a leader makes really tough decisions. As the CEO of the organization, I have to get my council steer them in the proper direction, and we do that collaboratively. Our council spent 45 hours developing a strategic plan, and that details our goals and objectives around climate change. So first of all, you have to take climate change seriously. You can't deny it. And secondly, you have to come up with a plan. And then thirdly, you have to actually attribute resources to it, which is what you do through the budget. So just to, and so we did it, we did a climate, we declared a climate emergency. We attributed an environmental levy to it. We put resources behind it. And then we asked our staff to execute on that. Now, I do want to just comment on a couple things that my opponent said. And you asked about that, the style that different from my opponent. First of all, I don't think 44,000 heads is a good idea. Our job is to have the courage to lead. That's what we're elected to do. And it's not about educating the public. We do want to bring the public along and build awareness, and that is part of our plan. But forming another committee, I think we started with our first committee, Councillor Gambier Aioli was on it back in 2003, I think. So we've had something like 15 committees and initiatives. Now is the time for action. We're out of time. So you make a plan, you execute on that plan, and then you measure.
Thank you, Marianne. Right, for our following questions, you'll have 1 minute for each answer. And also both of you will be allowed, or each of you will be allowed, 1 30-second follow-up to your opponent. Don't feel that you have to use it though. You may entirely agree with them. So the question is, what specific measures would you adopt to provide a safer walking and biking environment so that we can really actually push active transportation? Marcus, please.
Thanks, Jatinder. I think, I used to be on the police board. And so we look at public safety from a number of angles. So for example, vehicle safety, as well as pedestrian safety. So there are very specific statistics on that. So in terms of putting in the sidewalk, then we have to look at how many people are getting hit or not hit. Are there enough street lamps to provide visible clarity when the people walk down? And what is the speed of cars going by? I had the opportunity to walk what is called colloquially the gauntlet in the western part of West Vancouver. It's this very sort of dangerous stretch along the highway or along the road where families and young kids walk to school, and the sidewalk's about literally that far off the asphalt, and cars are whizzing by. There isn't really a protective barrier, and so I think for places like that, we need to be very careful of how we're maintaining pedestrian safety as well as vehicle traffic. So in terms of how we would measure it, I think that's one way to measure it.
Thank you, Marcus. Marianne Booth.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I've championed many initiatives that address both a more convenient and safer walking environment. So for walking, I'm a big believer in sidewalks. And how long do I have? A minute? All right, so big believer in sidewalks. And I've learned when I moved to West Vancouver that sidewalks were a bit verboten because people thought it was a rural community. I grew up on a farm, which was absolutely rural. And when I came here, I couldn't believe that sidewalks weren't encouraged and supported. That is changing now, but we still, out of 300 kilometers of roads, we only have 10 kilometers of sidewalks. And I'm getting calls almost daily for sidewalks. So sidewalks, bump outs, slow streets. And then as far as the biking environment, fully separated bike lanes. I'm one of these interested but afraid people, and I love the Spirit Trail. I championed extending the Spirit Trail from 13th to 18th, and also the safety upgrades to the bridge over the Capilano River.
Thank you, Marianne. So we have 30 seconds for a follow-up, if one of you want to take it.
On that question.
All right, so next question. Why is it important, in your view, to help our middle-class workers live near where they work? And could you enlist senior levels of government, so provincial and federal, to help address the housing crisis, which makes this so difficult?
Sorry, could you repeat the second half of it? I couldn't hear you through the speakers.
Sure. So, and could you enlist senior levels of government, provincial and federal, to help address the housing crisis, which makes that so difficult?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Housing is the core crux of what a community is. Without people, there is no community. So we need to make sure that we've got the housing for different people, for young people, young families, for retirees, for people who are empty nesters who are looking for a different kind of housing, even for people like me. I'm 41 years old. I don't have a family. Many of you know that, but I'd like to have a family one day. And this is the sort of community I would like to grow up in, or have my kids grow up in. And so I want to make sure that I can provide for them. And I'm not sure I can afford some of the housing right now, but I'm sure that once we look at the housing solutions, come up with very good, solid local area plans in the first year of the term, then we can execute on that. And then we need to move forward. We need to tweak our solutions as we go. Of course, circumstances will change, both politically, legally, and whatnot. And then, of course, you were mentioning about the provincial and federal levels of government. Absolutely. It's an all hands on deck solution that we need. No solution that we're going to be talking tonight can be handled solely by one level of government. It's going to take everyone. And so that's why I want to work with them.
Thank you, Marcus. Marianne Booth.
So I'm really, one of our proudest achievements was to approve workforce housing at 2195 Gordon. So just beside us, actually. And West Vancouver used to be a very middle-class place. Teachers could afford my husband's dad was a teacher. He could afford to live here, fire, police, nurses, teachers. And that has changed. And it's caused a bunch of problems. It's caused traffic congestion, the reverse commute. 75% of our workforce, as has been mentioned, now commute here. It causes a hollowing out of our supply of staff. We now have 5 bylaw officers. We're deficient in 5 bylaw officers in our bylaws department because they can't afford to live here. And so there's a whole bunch of ramifications when you can't get your workforce. And we are at the end of the line. And so workers, we lost 8 police officers to Surrey. We had one, and as far as okay, I didn't get to the second part.
Thank you, Marianne. Our next question. So after 20 years of climate change leadership, West Van District staff are now working on a comprehensive climate action strategy, bringing together many climate initiatives. I do believe you both supported this new plan a few weeks ago. How will you get councillors who don't agree to support future votes which flow from that strategy? And now we'll start with Marianne for the next 3.
Well, as has been alluded to, you don't control other people's behavior. Honestly, there's only so much you could do as a leader. I think the key is to get like-minded, like-valued people on council. I think, I really tried to bring council together, but when you're starting from a different value-based, it's not always easy. So how do you move forward? Well, what we tried wasn't always successful, was creating a plan, a strategic plan. And we spent 45 hours and 11 sessions with all of council. So we all had input. And at the end of the day, there were still a couple councillors that voted against it. So, everyone had an opportunity to speak up and everybody attended those meetings. It's very difficult. So I think there's only so much you can do. And I never get my perfect council. You pick the council. It's your job to do that. And I think that's why you need to be looking at what people are saying.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus Wong.
Thanks. This is a great question. I think the fundamental piece of any council, no matter who's on it, is trust. So on October 15th, that's the day of our vote. On the Monday, if I am successful as the mayor, I want to take the whole new council up for dinner on me. We're going to have food and wine. And we're not going to talk about policies. We're not going to talk about shop. We're going to talk about each other. Do you have kids? What are your hobbies? All that sort of stuff. And build a friendship, build a relationship. Now, this is going to take time. Absolutely. And so we're going to have to keep doing it, maybe once a month, every month, until we can come to a place where we can actually respect each other. We don't have to agree, but we can come to common consensus to be like, it's okay that you voted no and I voted yes, but let's try to find common ground on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's how we build consensus on council. So when there's disagreement, when there's frustration, when things are getting really heated, we can actually step back and say, you know what? We can still be friends and coworkers after this. We still have dinner reservation at Earl's after this. So let's work on whatever we're working on and do that. But I was actually reading on the My Sweetest Sky. Oh, no, I'll give you that example later.
Thank you, Marcus. All right, so our next question is that some climate policies, including the environmental levy, have been dismissed as virtual signaling by some. For those that don't know, this means actions designed to look good, but which are pretty empty. Leaving aside those comments, what would you do to explain and win support for our climate strategy from the community?
Sorry, could you just repeat the last part of the question?
Sure. So what would you do to explain and win support for our climate strategy from the community?
So I'll maybe just answer the second part of that question. I actually think there is support for the climate strategy in the community. I wouldn't be running if I didn't think the majority of people really get climate change. And the majority of Canadians really get climate change. It's one of the 3 top issues. So we're starting from a good position as a political leader. Yeah, I have a bit of a problem with that term virtue signaling. I think that's what leaders do, actually. They stand up for things, and sometimes it's not easy, and you have to be courageous. And if that's what virtue signaling is, then I guess I'm guilty of that. So because I do passionately believe in what I'm doing, and it's the right thing to do. And that's what leaders do. They stand up for the right things.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus Wong.
I'm glad you asked this question. I was on the My Sky website earlier today, and I was looking at their team. There's a young lady, I don't know if you're here. If you are, I want to talk to you afterwards because what you're doing is amazing. She's actually looking at the psychology of words that make people think a certain way. So especially when it comes to climate change, what are the psychology of the words we use to describe and explain climate change? And how does that make you change it to believe it or not? And so I think that's actually the sort of thing we need to be doing, right? So I'll give you a bit of example here. So in leadership theory, there's 2 approaches. One is called technical. I hope I have enough time. Technical leadership, where you basically throw money at a problem. Like your sink is clogged, so you're going to hire a plumber, you throw money at it, you solve it. Adaptive leadership is when you have to change the hearts and minds of people. Exactly, by using the words, getting them to confront the reality of their own values and what's outside. That's what we need to be doing as leaders, as a community. Working with them, asking the hard questions, getting them to examine what's outside and what's inside. And that's how you change it.
Thank you, Marcus. Is our next question, again, Marianne will start. Oh, yes, of course.
So the other thing, the other principle that I live by is that a principle isn't a principle until it costs you money. And climate change, a true test of whether you're committed to it is whether you're willing to put resources behind it. And we can use all the excuses in the world why we didn't, they didn't vote for the levy and, we really have to study it some more. But that's what it really comes down to. Do you walk the talk? And it comes down to money and resources. Bottom line, we can all just say that we believe in climate change and all that, but when it comes down to it, it's your voting and it's the money.
Thank you. Our next question. Oh, yes. Okay, go ahead.
Do I have 30 seconds or what is it? Thanks. Yeah, I voted against the first climate levy because you know why? Staff came forward and asked for money, but could not tell us what they're going to spend it on. I'm also a financial steward of your resources. And so the process that normally happens in any workplace is your employee comes to you and says, I'd like to do this project. Here's why I want to do it. This is how it's going to benefit the organization. And this is what I need for it. And then I'll look at it and say, good, great idea. Here's the resources. Or no, I think you need to tweak something, not the other way around. And so that's why fundamentally I said no. But the second time they did it right. And so I gave them the money.
Thank you. Right, the next question. Is $500 or $1,500 for lower income households a good investment to encourage people to leave their cars at home? So this is referring to the incentive pilot program, which is to be run alongside the other North Shore municipalities, and people can get a little bit of cash to get on an e-bike. I have to declare an interest. I ride an e-bike and I love it.
Yeah, I do. So I've got a couple of mottos in life. One of them is make it easy for people to do the right thing. So you incentivize, and you can use carrots and you can use sticks. And I really believe that this is a small price to pay. It's also going to be income tested. So it won't be just to anybody that can afford it. It will be actually, and those are the people that actually, for the most part, cannot afford to own a car. So this is a way, and I wouldn't be asking people to use e-bikes if my own family wasn't doing it. My husband, we bought an e-bike. You can get them fairly inexpensive, but that's still a big chunk of change, $2,500, $3,500 for an e-bike. And now he uses it all the time. And you can go down to one car. Well, we've actually shared a car for 30 years because I also believe in carpooling. But yeah, no, I don't have a problem making it easy for people to do the right thing.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus Wong.
Yeah, I think it's a great start. Like I said, EVs, e-bikes and all that sort of stuff, they make a small dent, but you know what will really make a dent? Do you know how much food is wasted around the world? 1/3 of the food that we produce is actually thrown out. That's 88 to 102 gigatons of greenhouse gases that would be reduced between 2020 and 2050 if we could actually solve that. That's a major chunk. So yes, absolutely, we need to do everything we can, e-bikes, EVs, and all that sort of stuff. But we also really need to be tackling the big things that will take a giant bite out of the climate change crisis.
Thank you, Marcus. Marianne.
Okay, so you guys can't see this, but my colleague, Councillor Cameron shared it with me, and it was alluded to by some of the other speakers earlier. So the biggest reduction potential in greenhouse gas emissions, you can see that one long line there, is infill. It's land use planning. And then the other things kind of are much lower than that, including healthy diets are like 160,000 metric tons of CO2 can be saved by proper urban infill versus healthy diets at about 35 metric tons. So yeah, there's a lot of little things you can do, but
thank you, Marianne. All right, on to our next question. Many governments, including Ottawa, say oil and gas extraction must continue while we transition to a low carbon economy and net zero by 2050. How do we do that? And what would the transition to net zero look like in West Vancouver? Marcus.
Thanks, Dana. So, there's a number of things we can do. So one of the options is geothermal, which would be in some cases backed by natural gas or electric, right? So that could be a really good way we retransition. So using, the one power source and then the other one as a backup. But I think we're gonna have to be really creative about this, right? So there's renewable natural gas where they take the methane from garbage and from manure and they pump that back into the system, and that becomes a form of carbon neutral natural gas. But certainly over time, yeah, we're gonna have to draw down one and increase the other as green technologies improve, become more efficient, but become more cost effective. So absolutely, we need to think about all these different solutions.
Sure.
So many governments, including Ottawa, say oil and gas extraction must continue while we transition to a low carbon economy and net zero by 2050. How do we do that? And what would the transition to net zero look like in West Vancouver?
Yeah, so that's a really complicated question. First of all, I think making huge investments in the oil and gas sector, as was done with the Trans Mountain Pipeline, was a big mistake. And our council opposed it and intervened on the lawsuit to try to stop that pipeline. We also have, though, supported the Just Transition initiative by the federal government to transition workers to other fields. But I can tell you that if the federal and provincial governments spent as much investment on green energy and renewables as they have in subsidizing oil and gas and LNG, we would be much further ahead. So, and yeah, the renewable natural gas is part of the solution, although we can't remember that it also still is a carbon emitter and not the panacea.
Thank you. No responses? Okay, move on. So a question about your personal environmental actions and commitments. So we asked candidates for council how often they use the bus or when they last used the bus, and whether or not they have compass cards. Marianne first this time, please.
So I already mentioned that my husband and I shared a car basically the whole time we were together, 30 years, one car. Secondly, when I built my house in 2016, when we built our house, sorry, in 2016, we put in geothermal. That was, actually it was 2006, sorry. It's a 16-year-old house. So we put it in and that was, it cost us a little more, but I'm emitting virtually no GHGs from my house. I take the bus all the time. I just took it to the Persian protest downtown. I love the bus. As a woman, I also feel more secure taking the bus because I'm not parking in underground parking. And I do have a compass card, and full disclosure, as a member of the Mayor's Council, even though Craig was my designate, I got the free compass card, and they do that because they want to encourage all of Mayor's Council members to take the bus. So I love the bus, and I love the blue bus, just saying.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus Wong.
Oh, beep, 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 beep. Yes, I've got a compass card, and I live in the British properties where the bus comes by infrequently. But if it did come by frequently, absolutely, I'd be on the bus. In fact, my preferred mode of transportation when I go downtown is C-Bus and SkyTrain. Love the Canada line. So I think we need to be making more investments in that. Did you know that in 2025, we'll be getting the Invictus Games, in 2026, we'll be getting the World Cup, and then 2030, we're more than likely getting the Olympics. So West Vancouver needs to have a very solid transportation plan because there's funding on the table. Remember, the Canada Line was built for the 2010 Games. So when these three major events come to Vancouver, we need to be ready, front and center with our plan, our proposal to be like, this is what we want to get built. And this is how we want to have it built in West Vancouver, whether it's increased or better transit infrastructure, whether it's e-bikes going up and down the hill so that people like me don't have to wait an hour for a bus to get to Park Royal, or whether it's, for example, light rail going east and west, and all these other different creative solutions. There is no silver bullet for our transportation woes and transit woes, and especially when it comes to climate change. But all of these things will work together.
Thank you, Marcus. All right, on to our next question. Since 2013, the district has been tracking its corporate emissions from its own operations, including buildings, infrastructure, and vehicles. This idea is to work towards becoming carbon neutral, but emissions have barely gone down. What will you do about it? Oh, Marianne.
That's a really great question. So talking about statistics and numbers, refrigeration is actually one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases. So like the air conditioning, like that thing right there. If we could actually have it solved in terms of making sure the technical solution is there's no leaks in the refrigerants and coolants in the world, there's about a 60 gigaton savings of greenhouse gases over that 30-year period that we've been talking about. That's a fairly simple engineering solution. So in terms of the buildings in the district, we've got lots of buildings, rec centers, gyms, all these places that are air conditioned. Council chambers are now air conditioned. So we need to really make sure that these pieces of infrastructure don't leak at the end of their life and contribute to that sort of greenhouse gases. That's certainly one thing. You know, we've talked about the food thing. And you know what, we need to think about alternative, perhaps, sources of protein. Is my time up? No? Okay, there we go. So bugs. Believe it or not, bug protein, no, I know you're making that face. If you grind it up and put it into your flour, we'll talk about that later.
So first of all, I just want to talk about air conditioning for a second. When we put geothermal in our house, one of the big benefits was that we actually, because we used forced air, we got heat in the winter and cooling in the summer, because that's how a heat pump works, right? You're extracting cool in the summer and you're extracting heat from the earth in the winter. And so actually, we're not polluting the environment at all with our air conditioning, and who knew that we would be having these heat domes? So that was rather prescient. As far as how would we reduce our GHGs, you cannot reduce if you're not setting metrics. And now that we have an environmental manager who's actually going to be doing the projections, doing the modeling, measuring the metrics and tracking it, then we can actually make some headway. And I think that's where most jurisdictions fall down. You can set all the lofty goals you want, but if you're not tracking it and measuring it, you're not going to reach your goal.
Can I just ask you both to go back to the specific issue of the district, the municipality's responsibility, the corporate emissions? You know, it's all very well asking residents and the community at large, but what about our vehicles or our buildings? Marcus first.
Sure, absolutely. You know, when it comes to our fleet vehicles, whether it's police, fire, or even say bylaws or engineering people, we need to be transitioning those vehicles into EVs, you know, so that's certainly a big part of it. As well as we need to be looking at how we're actually working. Are we sending employees or having employees come into City Hall or Municipal Hall, rather technically, and they're commuting and doing that, even if they're on a bus? If it's not an electric bus, there are carbon emissions associated with that. So we need to be looking at whether we can have them work from home, which is probably a more sustainable way to having employees, you know, work for the district. And I think all these sorts of things that we're talking about tonight are ways we can sort of pull into the way we do business at Municipal Hall.
Yes, so I agree that investing in our fleet, and now that we actually have $1.2 million to do that, we can invest in light vehicles. It's easy to go to electric vehicles, so we can reduce our emissions that way. Municipal Hall, when we upgraded it, we reduced our GHG emissions by 90%, just around energy efficiency and use of fossil fuels. So obviously retrofitting buildings, which we did, is in incentivizing retrofits. Again, if you have to support it with subsidies, you can get grants from the provincial government for that. So our motto is, our municipal model is lead by example and inspire excellence. So you can't expect others to do it unless you're actually walking the talk. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, we all love talking about traffic. We live on the North Shore, an accident of geography. We're often stuck behind somebody who may be traveling right through our district, the two highways in our district, to get somewhere else. So we know that just if we talk about West Van residents' greenhouse gas emissions, so forget about people who live in Squamish or elsewhere, 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from vehicles. And as was mentioned earlier, electric cars are also contributing to the traffic problem. What would you do to reduce our dependency on cars? It's a delicate thing because people don't like to be told. Marcus first.
Well, I think crucially, we need to make sure that we have actually efficient roads that are paved, no potholes, that sort of thing, right? Because if you're bumping along, you have to go slower because you're going to ruin the suspension of your car and everybody behind you slows down and the bus slows down and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's one piece, certainly in terms of our basic infrastructure. I think of a young man on my volunteer team who lives in the Western region. He goes to Collingwood School. And the bus goes by his house not very frequently or regularly. He'll either miss it because it's come early or come late. And so he can't make it to school on time. So he has to drive, or his parents have to drive him. But he'd rather take the bus if he could. And so we need to have more frequent and more consistent, traffic or transit rather. So that is certainly a solution. But then we also need, as we were talking about earlier on, having ways to connect people from up the hill, down the hill to the Marine Drive corridor. right? Because that's truthfully where all the major bus traffic will go. And so we need to be connecting people north-south so that they can get east-west.
Thank you, Marcus. Marianne?
Could you just repeat the question just so I get the phrasing correct?
Yeah, so it's really about the 40% of our emissions that come from cars. And switching to electric is not the solution in and of itself because of the traffic problem. So how do we persuade people to maybe use alternatives?
So there's a couple things. First of all, you have to make alternative forms convenient, safe, reliable, and attractive. And as the chair of North Shore Connects, our top priority is to bring rapid transit to the North Shore as soon as possible, which has been mentioned will take 50,000 cars off the road. We have tons of congestion. We've got the reverse commute on the upper levels. So you have to make it, again, easy for people to do the right thing. Not everybody will be able to use it, but I can tell you that a lot of our workforce will use it. The second thing is that a good land use plan is a good transportation plan. And we talked about infill earlier, how important that is, but the best way to get people out of their cars is actually to build smart communities, 15-minute neighborhoods where people can walk or bike to services. Making people drive long distances for work or for their services is not a recipe for getting people out of their cars.
Thank you. Right, now time for your closing statements. You each have 2 minutes. And Marcus started last time, so Marianne.
Am I going to start?
Yeah.
My speech. So thank you to Tinder and Julie for hosting. I'd like to begin by congratulating everyone involved in Positive Voices for hosting this event and for helping us to focus on a very real climate emergency that we're all facing. I was asked recently what keeps me up at night. The answer is quite simple: the health, safety, and social well-being of our citizens. Whenever possible, I enjoy meeting with students and youth of the community. Most recently at an online youth forum that I hosted on Instagram last night. What worries them? Many of the things that prompted me to seek re-election: housing affordability, access to transit, and more than ever before, climate change. They have no interest in making West Vancouver great again. They aren't laden with nostalgia for the 1990s. They want a future for this planet. They want us to feel the anxiety that they feel, to stop talking about it and do our moral duty and take action. So I'm extremely proud of the leadership that West Vancouver has shown. Our strategic plan directs us to initiatives that will help to protect our natural environment, to reduce our impact on it, and to address climate change. Yes, we're winning awards for it, but there is so much more to do. I'm no Greta Thunberg, but if you know anything about me, you will know that I have an unwavering resolve to do whatever it takes to ensure a bright and sustainable future for all of us. My worst fear, that one day our 2 daughters would ask me, why didn't you do something? I would be very grateful for your support on October 15th so that I can carry on the critical work that we have just begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Marcus.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And thank you, Marianne, for also showing up. I think being a leader means you show up no matter what, no matter the hard questions and things you'll be asked, because you're trying to find solutions. Solutions by bringing people together. I've often said that this community is not just my community. It's not just your community. It's actually our community. Yeah, there are things we don't maybe agree on, but at the end of the day, that's all we've got. We've only got this community. And so we've got to work together no matter what. And so that's what I want to be as a mayor. I want to bring people together, despite language barriers, despite cultural barriers. I talk to people in the Chinese community, in the Persian community, and they've got all the same concerns as everybody else. And that's so encouraging because I know deep down, this is their home as well, and they want to play a part. They want to make this better. I want to make this better. And so tonight, if any of the things you've heard inspire you, I encourage you to get involved if I'm mayor. I want you to be on these committees. I want you to be part of the decision-making process. I want you to help me find solutions to everything that we've been talking about, the housing, the transportation, the climate change, oh my gosh, the climate change, and everything else. Because only by doing it together are we actually going to be able to make this a better West Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And that brings us to the end of this forum on the environment. Thank you to Marianne Booth and Marcus Wong for your time tonight.
To our audience here and at home, please do stay informed, talk to your friends and neighbors, and exercise your right to vote. You can vote in advance on Saturday and Monday at Municipal Hall between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m, or wait until next Saturday, October the 15th, for Election Day. And as somebody once said, vote with your brain and not your gut.
Finally, a huge thank you to Kiwanis North Shore Housing Society for hosting our event this evening. And thank you to all the positive voices, volunteers who made this happen. If you haven't already, please sign up on the Positive Voices website and donate your toonies or dollar bills at the welcome desk.
Yes. As we depart tonight, remember that we are in a seniors residential complex, so please leave the area quietly. Thank you for joining us on a most informative evening.